And a warm welcome to each of you here. Today is a special program because normally we are hosted here by Ashwita, but this time Ashwin and his team are collaborating with us in this program, and we have the music of the Odhuvars meeting the art on this wall. At the end of the talk, the team from Ashwita will be happy to walk you through and explain the paintings as well. So do stay after the program. And a special welcome to Madhusudanan Kalaiselvan, who's not, please come. He's not a new face to Intact. He's been here and given talks several times, and being from the same architectural fraternity, I'm very, very happy that there's someone who's taken to tradition and culture to such a depth and studied it so deeply to be able to share it with the rest of the world. And wanted to just say that Intact is a non-profit organization established in 1984, and we just crossed the landmark of 40 years about 4 years ago. We continue our journey in preserving unprotected heritage. As you all know, the ASI, Archaeological Survey of India, does protect the monuments that are listed as heritage. Now, there are thousands and thousands of unprotected heritage, whether it is built, as you all know, buildings like Senate House, Victoria Public Hall that was recently restored and is in the news, and several other buildings that represent our heritage. So Intact takes care of those and looks into the preservation of this for the future generations. Similarly, natural heritage. We look into forests, lakes, ponds, rivers, etc., water bodies, natural heritage, also sacred groves, which come under that, then plants and various aspects of that. Then we look into heritage education, inculcating in the younger generation value for heritage, and hopefully they will turn into custodians of our valuable heritage in the years to come. So heritage education is a very, very important part of what we do. And of course, what has recently been recognized as intangible heritage, that is oral traditions, music, dance, kolam, puppetry, all of these crafts come under intangible heritage. So today we bring our focus onto one important aspect of our intangible heritage, the Odhuvars, and the tradition of their singing in temples of Tamil Nadu in praise of Lord Shiva. Some of these hymns are composed by the mover, the mover, Sambandar, Appar and Sundarar, and their offerings of divine hymns to the Lord. And they are even considered like a garland as an offering to the Lord. And we look forward to Madhusudanan Kalaichavan to take this forward and tell us all about the Odhuvars. Thank you so much. Devakar, may I request you to please introduce the speaker?
Good evening, friends. It's my proud privilege to present to you the speaker for today's evening, Professor Madhusudanan Kalaichavan. Professor Madhusudanan Kalaichavan is an architect, conservation specialist, and scholar of Saiva Siddhanta, known for his work on Indian temple culture and Tamil religious traditions. A gold medalist in his post-graduation and doctoral researcher in temple town planning, he combines academic rigor with deep engagement in field-based heritage studies. He currently serves as faculty of Saiva Siddhanta at the Dharmapuram Madinam, with over 800 lectures delivered in Tamil and English. He has built a wide and diverse audience for subjects ranging from temple architecture and epigraphy to Tevaram traditions and culture. He is the founder of Ratham, Road Access to Temples, Heritage and Monuments, through which he has led immersive heritage journeys across India since 2012. His contributions have been recognized with honors including the Vedavalli Memorial Award, Ilakkiya Chemmal, Professor Swaminathan Award, and Saiva Tamil Arinyar, to name a few. Madhu, the floor is yours. We're eagerly waiting for you.
நம பார்வதி பதே ஹரஹர மகாதேவா. தென்னாடுடைய சிவனே போற்றி, எந்நாட்டவர்க்கும் இறைவா போற்றி, ஆரூர் அமர்ந்த அரசே போற்றி, சீரார் திருவையாரா போற்றி. வணக்கம். A very good evening to you all. It is my privilege indeed to be here sharing my interest in a very popular ancient tradition of singing in temples, the Odhuvar tradition, to an audience who are well versed with Indian culture, and to do it under Intact's banner was something that I had been wanting to. And so when this year's Intact topic came for a discussion, this is what I had suggested, and they were magnanimous enough to accept it and give me the opportunity. Thanks to Intact, the office bearers and the organizers for giving me this opportunity to be here today evening, and thanks to all of you all here. The Odhuvar tradition, as it is popularly The Odhuvar tradition, as it is popularly known today, has its origin in the long culture of praising the Lord Almighty. To sing before you talk and to paint before you write is an anthropological aspect to understand how creativity takes precedence before a curated way of learning. So here we have music as one of the most ancient artistic endeavor of humankind in expressing emotions. And as we culture in almost all forms of faith systems across the globe, without any discrimination, music has played a significant role in nurturing a faith system. Most of the cases, sacred verses have always been chanted/sung instead of just reading them. And India, which has been a cradle for several faith systems to originate from, deep-rooted with the Vedic faith, from which many schools branched, musical praises to the Almighty is something very, very common. In fact, the very chant of the Vedic text sounds very musical, and it is in fact set to meter. So these are not prose. Predominantly, all these sacred works that we have can be classified as poetry. That is set to a specific meter and that can be chanted or sung. Of course, we have the Samavedam, which has very, very well controlled musical notes with which it is to be chanted, wherein you can actually identify the matras in which every verse is extended, expanded, and that's how it is rendered. So this tradition continues. And as bhakti set in, we have several regional languages playing a very, very significant role in interpreting the Vedic texts, understanding and trying to explore and bring out the quintessence of the Vedas in praising the gods. And so here in Tamil Nadu, I start the session from the Bhakti movement. We've had faith systems very well described in Sangam literature. Generally, when we talk about Tamil Nadu, it is safe to begin from the Sangam lore because that's where documented history of Tamil Nadu kind of, starting from. All that is documented there should have taken several centuries to evolve to that level. Academically, we consider Sangam period to have happened roughly 2,300 years back, give or take 100 years this way, that way, a couple of hundreds this way, that way. But yeah, on an average, 2,300 is the most favored number, so I also stick on to it. From then on, we have a very well documented history of Tamil culture, which speaks about the civilizational value that people from this part of India had. And religion is certainly a very specific aspect of a culture. Across the globe, so far, there had never been an archaeological find of a civilization which considers itself atheistic in its basic roots. Atheism as a part of culture is there, but to say that there is a civilization that exists wherein the basic norms of the civilization governs a no-God tradition has not yet been found at all. So wherever we evolved, human being, the nature was to understand something as God and be thankful in most occasions and fearing in some occasions. So here in Tamil culture, we have the Sangam literature which documents extensive praises to several gods. The most popular ones are of course Shiva, Mahavishnu, Balarama, Subramanya, Devi in various forms, and as an extension, the weapons that each of these deities carry and their vahanas, all of this being praised. Several episodes from the Puranas have been discussed at length. When you take Shiva as one of the most primary gods, we have episodes of Gangavatarana, Shiva being Dakshinamurti, Shiva performing the Tripura Samhara, Shiva's Ardhanarishwara aspect, and Devi as his counterpart, identified as the one who was born in the mountains, Malai Magal as she is called. All of these traditional norms with which we understand Shiva has been well documented in the Sangam lore. So if we can take them to be praises towards Shiva, well, we have the Sangam literature which praises him. In fact, I would like to recall a very, very popular poem by Avvayar when she praises King Adiyaman. Adiyaman, who is known for his charity. When he presented this wild berry to Avvayar, which can bless her with long lifespan, she praised him. She said, may your praises, may you be remembered till such times that the dark-hued throat, white, bhasma-smeared god is remembered. So she describes the appearance of Shiva and says, as long as Shiva is remembered, may you be remembered of. So that's how they've praised people. So remembering gods and praising them is a tradition that we've always had. That only just gets a little more structure, and that is where the post-Sangam period, socio-political changes comes into picture. There is a general argument that the Sangam period faith systems included a lot of Jain and Buddhist ideologies. So to say, it's a very, very bird's eye view perspective of what is the Sangam lore from. In fact, references directly or indirectly to these two popular religions in other parts of India, is lesser than minimum in Sangam literature. There are hardly any direct references to these two religious systems or people who carried it. But post-Sangam, there is a change. We can safely believe that the shift of the Jain monks from south of Karnataka into Tamil Nadu through Madurai and settling in the hillocks around Madurai, where they have conducted several Samana Palli, where you find these Tamil Brahmi inscriptions, which for that matter has a lot of textual errors, syntax errors, a clear clue that the inhabitants of the cave who probably etched those inscriptions were in masters of Tamil. Now we have to consider grand literature like the Sangam literature being authored at the same time when these inscriptions with spelling error and syntax errors were authored too. So that is an imbalance. So we can safely assume that the inhabitants of those caves weren't this strong in Tamil back then. But post Sangam period, we see a lot of impregnation of ideas into the existing Tamil culture, which gets reflected in works like Silappatikaram and Manimekalai much later. And that is when the bhakti movement, as it is academically called, comes into picture. It was not an organized movement against something or for something or anything like that. For the ease of remembering it and for academic history, we call it the bhakti movement. And there we have the first and the foremost of all the acharyas, Karaikal Ammayar, who's right there, a beautiful murti of Karaikal Ammayar, the one who is revered by Shiva himself as his mother. He addresses her as Amma, and here you have her. So she was the first one to follow this tradition from the Sangam literature to praise Shiva for what he is. But unlike in the Sangam literature, this was Shiva specific. The first ever authored bhakti text in Tamil is attributed to this woman here. This aged woman who took the form of a ghost, withering the beauty and her youthfulness so as to serve Lord Shiva as one of his Bhutaganas. So she was the one who started this movement of singing the praises of Shiva as seen in the Vedas and Agamas in Tamil, setting it to perfect meters, adding music to it. Because in one of her works, she talks about the 7 notes equivalent, the Sarigama Padani equivalent as it is seen in Tamil, and talks about how the scale varies. She gives a long list of various musical instruments, percussion, string, wind instrument, pair of cymbals, whatnot. And her only prayer finally when Shiva asked her what she wants was, bless me to sing sitting at your feet every time you dance. Whenever you dance, may singing to your dance be my only blessing. That was what she wanted. So singing his praise was the ultimate aim of the person who started singing him in Tamil, and that's where Karaikal Ammayar comes. And so she started this, which was later expanded by Sri Jnana Sambandhan, as he is called as the founding father of the Padiga Peruvali. Peruvali literally translated is a highway. And he in fact constructed this highway, a very safe journey that which you take will lead you to Shiva. And what was this characterized with? The Padigamgal. Quite literally, Pati here means 10, Pattun Cholramya and the Pati. Padigam means a work which has 10 verses. So if and only if a set of 10 verses are made up, it gets qualified as a Padigam. In some occasions, there are 11 verses also, but the 11th one becomes the Palashruti types, where the boon that you get by chanting these are explained. So the set of 10 or 11 verses becomes a Padigam. And it was Jnana Sambandhar who took the lantern from the hands of Karaikal Ammayar and walked a long way, laying for us the Padiga Peruvali. Both Karaikal Ammayar and Jnana Sambandhar, apart from being poets and authoring these songs, set it all to perfect music, because they give references to several pan or the close to ragam equivalent in singing these verses and tell that this verse has been composed in this pan. And we have a long history of musicology in the Sangam period. There is a well laid out system of music which is associated with emotions, which is associated with landscape, which is associated with seasons, part of the day, whatnot. A very, very complicated system of pan isai, where the tonal values are collected together, and with the varying tones, you have different pans that are born, and with each of the pan characterized with a landscape or an emotion or a part of a day or a seasonal change is the background for the music that was being rendered. So Jnana Sambandhar takes it forward, but there is a slight difference. The pan system or the musical system of the Sangam period should have been slightly very native and naive, very naive in the early stages. But during Jnana Sambandhar's period, the richness to it should have been added, or it could have evolved in those 400 odd years. And so when it comes to Jnana Sambandhar's time, he is very particular about singing him, setting it all to beautiful music. And he in fact calls himself Naalum Innisayal Tamil Parappum Jnana Sambandhar, the one who took it upon himself to spread the language, the greatness of Tamil through his music. So Tamil set to music was his identity. So he, along with his contemporary, who is Sri Tirunavukkarasa Swamigal, or Appar as he is fondly addressed, he was also there. Both of them were eternal travelers. All through their life, they have traveled temple hopping from one region to another. In fact, Upper, back in the 7th century, had dared to take a pilgrimage all the way up to Kailasha. And he had ventured into almost the Kailasha mountains. And then he stopped by Shiva and he's asked to come back, and he got to dip in a tank and he was shifted to Thiruvaiyar here in south of India. And so several miracles are attributed to their verses. And the most popular one by Gnanasambandar is about how here, right here in Mylapore, during his visit, he managed to bring back to life a girl who was dead and burned and reduced to a pot of ashes and bones. From the relics, it's believed that the girl took form and came up right at Kapalishwarar Kovil. So several such miracles are associated with these padigams, which adds on a value of spirituality, mysticism to it. They have tried almost all forms of poetic meters. They have tried and set it to several imaginative backgrounds, several contexts that they have created to suit a particular padigam. There is love lost, there is a lot of praises to Swami, there are attributes given to him, there are expansions of Puranic episodes. So the subject is limitless and they have tried it all. And following them between the 6th and the 7th century, in the 8th century you have Sundaramurti Swamigal, who took it upon himself to first publish the long list of all those who can be canonized as the Nayanmars, the slaves of Shiva, who served him and his devotees. So we have Gnanasambandar, Appar and Sundara, who were active between 6th to the 8th century, who took it upon themselves to spread the praise of Shiva as he is deemed in the Vedas and the Shivagamas. Those Tamil poems, because they were poems, had to be set to music and being sung. We have references to several Nayanmars who were musicians themselves, in fact. So starting from the religious background of the Sangam period, it gets itself nurtured and fit itself into the socio-political changes that were happening in Tamil Nadu. And that is when the religions like Jainism and Buddhism started taking an influence, which was addressed by the Vedic traditions using regional language by people like Karaikal Ammayar, but strongly by Sri Gnanasambandar, Appar Swamigal and Sundaramurti Swamigal. But Gnanasambandar had to deal with the Pandyas and Appar had to manage the same socio-political changes in the northern districts of Tamil Nadu. With Kaveri running in the center, the Pallavas and the Pandyas being very active and powerful in the 6th, 7th centuries, Gnanasambandar managed to get to track the Pandya kingdom, and that's exactly what Appar did with the Pallava kings. So in both the extremes of Tamil Nadu, it was sorted out by these two people. And then in their path came Sundaramurti Swamigal, to whom these challenges were very minimum, but he had his own way of singing the praise of devotees. So to bring back the society from its lost track into a fold which has been ancient, time-tested, was predominantly spearheaded by the works of these acharyas. And between the 3rd, 4th to the 6th, 7th century, you had several socio-political changes, which includes the rule of the Kalabaras, about whom we know very minimum, but they did have an impact over the social changes, which was also addressed by these acharyas. Then you have the Pallavas, the Pandyas in the south, and the Cholas got themselves sandwiched between these two mighty armies. And they were a very, very minimum kingdom, just occupying the banks of Kaveri, immediate precincts of Kaveri river. Up north were the Pallavas, down south were the Pandyas. So with these two kings taking over the rule, and how Appar Swamigal and Gnanasambandar managed to set it right has what has resulted in the Tamil Nadu that we have today. For a moment, if you just imagine that this didn't happen, the content that you see here in the slide didn't happen, probably the temples that we are also proud about, the tall towering gopurams which are an address to Tamil Nadu, the culture here, so much so that even the official logo carries the gopuram, would have probably not existed. So if there are temples, if there are festivals, if we still call this our culture, it is them to whom we should be thankful. So they led the path starting from the 6th, 7th century till the 8th century. And in their path tracked Manikavachakar much later, around the 9th century. So this is exactly the period of 3 to 4 centuries that is academically described as the Bhakti movement, where you had these saint poets who authored poems, temple hopped, visited several temples, sung about the temple towns, the streets, people there, the water bodies there, landscapes there, groves there, temple compounds, gopurams, sannadhis, practices, communities, whatnot. They've given an extensive, very detailed documentation. Of course, there will be some poetic exaggeration, but if you can push that out and see, it is a brilliant, extensive corpus compilation of the society back in the 6th, 7th, 8th and 9th century. What information you probably cannot get through inscriptions, which are very minimum from that times, is what you get from the literary works of these Nayanmar. So even if you're not religious, the literary value of these beautiful sacred works are too much to be left unappreciated. Then, so you have Karakalamayar followed by Jnana Sambandar. The other musicians in the list of the Nayanmars. This is an image of one of those temple musicians from the Dharmaraja Ratha, the first floor of the Dharmaraja Ratha, to which most of us might not have an access. And this is from the internet, so from Puratattva website. So the first floor of the Dharmaraja Ratha, the access is very minimum, the width is very minimum, so nobody gets to actually walk there. But during conservation, yes, somebody had managed a picture. That is how a temple musician or a bard probably looked back in the 7th century when it was being built. So that's a small veena that he holds, and it is held in your hand, and you rest it on your shoulder and you play. There are only 3 strings in it, and the musician plays. So having this one floor had several other images of temple attendants. So there is a priest with a bell in his hand, there is somebody who is carrying a flower basket, there is somebody who is carrying a water pot. So this is like the temple attendants who have been accommodated there. So this is probably the temple musician. And so we have Karakalamayar, we have Jnana Sambandar, followed by Appar, Sundarar. All of them were musicians, all of them were poets. So when you call them poets, they should have had their own musical knowledge, tendency to set it to meter and sing. And the content there talks about several the drums and instruments and whatnot. So the musical context there is pretty fixed in their own works. Then you have a flautist called Anaya Nayanar, who was born in the community of cowherds and whose only way of bhakti to Shiva was to take the cows along with him, leave them to graze themselves, and start playing his flute. One fine day, moved by his bhakti through music, Shiva manifested in a kondrai tree right in front of him. And as he started playing, the music was good enough to help the tree flower itself. The branches with the foliage seemed like the matted hair locks of Shiva, and Shiva just manifested out of the kondrai tree, blessed him, granted him moksham, and took him along. What did he do? Play the flute. Present the music as an offering to Shiva. He played the Panchakshara with those 7 notes in the flute. He controlled it in a way and got out the syllables in his music. So the continuous musical rendering of the Panchakshara, the sacred 5-syllable mantra, earned him a place at Kailasha. So you have one Nayanar who is a flautist. And then you have Tirunelakantattu Yalpanar, as he is called. He is in fact Tirunelakantar, that's his name. But his profession is there as a suffix, Yalpanar. Panars are the traditional musicians who've been referred to starting from the Sangam literature. The male members of the community were called Panar, and they were supported by their women counterpart who were called as Viraliya. Panar and Viraliya as a couple. They sing, they dance, they present, they dramatize texts. So they were into the cultural fold. The Odhuvars should have certainly extended their knowledge from there, borrowed and improvised on the nuances and presented a very classical school of music too. So you have one such Panar who had mastered the yard like nobody else. In fact, there is a very special Padigam by Jnana Sambandar where the community of Panars, the relatives of Tirunelakantar, described his music to be the one that enables Jnana Sambandar to compose such songs. And Panar requested Sambandar to compose a set of 10 songs which cannot be rendered in the harp. And so that is how the Yalmuri Pan and the Padigam was born, where Jnana Sambandar sets it to a tone that it cannot be played on the strings of his harp. And so the harp breaks and he accepts his defeat and says, and tells his relatives, it is the knowledge of Jnana Sambandar that enhances the music and certainly not me accompanying him. And so that is Tirunelakantattu Yalpanar, who back then the social setup had positioned them somewhere at the lower levels. But Jnana Sambandar, who was a Brahmana from the Kaundilya Gotram, forced him inside his Yagasali and asked him to spend his night right there. Gave him his bed and to sleep in the Yagasali. That was how music of Yalpanar, with the devotion laden to it, gave scope for him to go up there. And so that is yet another Nayanmar. You have Tirunelakantattu Yalpan. And then there is a sect that is referred to, not an individual Nayanar. In fact, there are 9 such groups of devotees. Whoever practices those tasks, they can all be grouped into that title. So it's not a once and for all sealed list. It is not that it's frozen and you cannot add more. So here you have devotees who perform a certain task in a specific way. And one such task is the people they called as Paramanaye Paduvar, the ones who sing the praise of Shiva, or the ones who sing only the praises of Shiva. Because it says Paramanaye Paduvar. Tamil and the Yekaram Varumbodhu, it's a stress there. So they sing the praise only of Shiva. Paramanaye Paduva. So people who are trained in such arts, music and dance and dramatics and oration, if they take it upon themselves to express their love and devotion for Shiva and his devotees through music, dance and drama and oration, well, they are all Nayanars themselves. So that's how special music as a way for love and devotion to Shiva has been understood. In Tirumuraigal, the very word Tirumurai, it is a collection of those 12 volumes of works which has close to 18,000 odd songs that makes up to the praises of these Nayanmars on Shiva. Some of the authors of Tirumurai, they are not Nayanmars, and so you have other sacred poets who have sung and whose works have been included too. Where you have a classification of the first 3 volumes, which is a collection of the songs of Sri Trinyana Sambandar. The 4th, 5th and the 6th is that of Appar. The 7th volume is completely dedicated to Sundara. The 8th volume of work called the Tiruvachakam and Tirukkovayar is dedicated to Manikavachaka. The 9th and the 11th volumes are from various poets. All their works are put together and compiled. 10th is that of Tirumoolar, who is authored on yoga, who is authored on agamas. It's a collection of 3,000 odd songs, which makes up the Tirumantram. That's the 10th volume. And the 12th is, of course, the most praised Periya Puranam or Tiruttondar Kadai, Tiruttondar Puranam as it is called. So that is by Shekhala. So in all these 12 works, the first 7 volumes, which includes the works of Sambandar, Appar and Sundara, makes up to what is called as the Tevaram. That is the key word from where the Odhuvars journey begins. In fact, till early this century, in the temple of Meenakshi Sundareswarar at Madurai, there were a few very strong Odhuvars. In fact, there was one gentleman called Tandavamurthy Odhuvar who was very particular that no works succeeding the works of the first 3 are rendered inside the Meenakshi temple. And that included even the works of great saints like Arunagirinatha himself. In fact, back then, Sri Panditurai Tevar was the in charge of the temple, a very able administrator, quite a strong voice in Madurai. So this Odhuvar had managed to convince him and get an approval from him that nobody gets to sing any song but those of the first 3 acharyas. The Tevaram from the 7 Tirumurais are the only ones that can be rendered in front of Meenakshi and Sundareswarar in this temple. That's how special the collection of Tevara Padigams are. It's a common game given to all the 7 volumes. So setting them to music is the major task of the Odhuvars. Learning several Padigams there, that is in fact the major task of the Odhuvar. There are references to singing the praise of Shiva. Paadum Tirumurai Parpadi Padangal Sudumin Chenni Vai Thottiram Sollume. Sing the praise of Shiva, chant his names, keep chanting his names, and you are assured of moksha. Then you have Shekhala who talks about Tirumurai Eluduvor Vasipur. Apart from just singing Tirumurai, there were people who were engaged in making copies of the Tirumurais. There were people who worked as scribes probably to make copies of it. In fact, there is a reference to several Odhuvars from Vedaranyam who did get a meager earning, in fact a living, by making several copies before printing became this popular and sending it over to the Shaivites of Jaffna and Colombo in Sri Lanka. It was accessible from Vedaranyam. The Sri Lankan Shaivite denomination was always associated with Tamil Nadu through Vedaranyam port. So making copies of Tirumurais and sending it there was a way of earning for the Odhuvar community till late 19th century, early 20th century. So even the practice of making copies of Tirumurais was considered to be a sacred way of expressing your devotion. So where do we get all these Tirumurais from? The traditional belief is that after the Tevaram authors, much after their times, all the sacred manuscripts which had the poems were all stacked together and kept under lock and key in a room in Chidambaram temple, Nataraja Swami temple. The whereabouts of the room which was not known to anybody. The common belief is that the temple authorities, the Podudikshitargal, had a belief that if and only if the 3 acharyas, Sambandar, Appar Swamigal and Sundara, come back and command that the doors be open, it cannot be opened at all. But please be informed, it is not what we probably saw in this popular film. It was not that they had it in lock and key and actually denied access to anybody. The Puranam which speaks about it gives it very clearly. Even the whereabouts of the room was not known. So that's how mystic it was. And then we have this able administrator, Sri Rajaraja Cholan, who was a great Shiva devotee himself, a pious king himself, who took the help of Sri Nambiyandar Nambi, who as a little kid was blessed by the divine intervention of Sri Polla Pullayar. That's the shrine of Kolla Pillayar in a little village called Tirunarayur near Chidambaram. As a little kid, he had the divine intervention by Ganesha in his life, and he became very popular. When Rajaraja Chola learnt about the little kid and the miracles that happened, he zeroed upon him to assist him in bringing back the Tevaram verses. So he went, visited him, convinced by his the divinity in the little kid. He requested him, told him about this project to retrieve the Tevaram Padigams, and both of them came up with a plan to cast images of Appar, Sundara and Sambandar, take them in a procession to Chidambaram, and say that if these are all there here, I mean, they're all acharyas. The murtis are our acharyas for us. So you don't see them as mere statues. There is life that is breathed into them by the invocation that you have done. So they are the acharyas, they are here now. And so saying, when the king demanded, it is said that the rooms, whereabouts of which was not known till then, appeared out of nowhere and the doors threw open. The king, along with Nambiyandar Nambigal, went in only to discover that several of the manuscripts have been lost to time, and whatever was remaining was saved by pouring oil on it, retrieving it, setting it, arranging the manuscripts, and Nambiyandar Nambigal took it upon himself to get it scribed upon and took copies of it and stacked it into what we call as the Tevaram Tirumuraigal today. So the first 7 Tirumurais and the 8th Tirumurai were compiled by Sri Nambiyandar Nambigal around the 10th century. But as I told you, they are not just poems, but they were set to music and they were being sung. And so he wanted the notations, the musical notations added to it. What exactly can be done? Of course, the Chola country was popular for its music and dance and tradition, so anybody could have set it to music. But Nambiyandar Nambigal insisted that this is sacred music. We will have to take it to somebody who was well versed in it. And that is when they were able to trace the roots of a lady called Sokkiyar, who was apparently a descendant of the wife of Tirunilakandatti Yalpana, the gentleman who played harp with Jnana Sambandar during his times. That was like a good 400 years back. And so his wife was called Matanga Chodamaniyar, and in her lineage came this lady, a musician again, called Chokkiyar, who was a resident of Irikattam Puliyur, a small village near Chidambaram again. So the king, along with Nambiyandar Nambigal, visited her, and completely taken back by the king of South India, being at her doorsteps, she was happy to host them and requested them how she could help. And when they told her about the plan that they had, the project that they had in hand, she was more than happy to help and said, we have certain musical notations which we follow as traditional pun. And so based on the notations here that we have, we can set all of these to tune. And it is believed that she helped Nambiyandar Nambigal set the tune to it and brought it out and propagated it as Tirumuraigal. Of course, Rajaraja Chola was pious and commandful enough to get several Odhuvars, learn it and be appointed in temples, took care of their remunerations, and the Odhuvar music spread like wildfire. And so this 10th century mark is when you see a sudden burst in the number of Odhuvars getting appointed in almost all popular temples, starting from places like Kalahasti, up north, to Rameshwaram, and all popular temples in between. So the 10th century is when the rigor of the Odhuvars was brought out. But will that mean that there were no Odhuvars before then? Sundarar was somewhere active around the 8th, 9th century. So between then to the 10th century, roughly 150 years, where there are no Odhuvars at all. Well, we have to vary a bit in it. And so yeah, there are these padigams, the pun which is equated to the ragas today. A little on how these puns get equated to the ragas much later, but just be informed, we have there are 4 basic pun. The permutation combination and the tonal variations in each of which gives birth to several tens of puns, several tens of ragams. So how the system of the Melakarta ragam here and the variations in the notations, the notions there, the scale there, gives birth to several ragas, the Janya ragas as they are called. So here again you have 4 basic pun which is given way to several tens of pangal. And so here in the last century, 20th century, there was a calculated move to sit and sort this out, to understand how each of the pun probably resounded, and several of the stalwart Odhuvars were brought together and offered a stage to discuss, fight, debate, argue, then settle with an issue and sign a chapter which listed the specific ragams to those pun. More on this a little later, but just be informed there are popular pangal which are identified with their Carnatic equivalent ragas. So the 10th century, that's where we left it. Rajaraja Chola, who popularized the Odhuvar tradition. But that does not mean that the Odhuvar tradition was born in the 10th century, because thankfully we have a handful of inscriptions which talks about a class of workers called as Tiruppadigam Vinnappam Seivar being appointed in temples. Thankfully, we have those inscriptions to very clearly argue that Odhuvar tradition had existed much before Rajaraja's time, just that it was too scarce. Hardly half a dozen inscriptions we get before Rajaraja's time, all over Tamil Nadu, maybe 8 or 9 max, which talks about Tiruppadiyam Vinnapam Seivargal who being appointed. And in that list, probably the oldest one, and the various names with which they are identified, they are called as Pidarar. Pidarar, that's one very popular name that we get to see to describe the profession of the Odhuvar. To me personally, a very beautiful Tamil name, Nindrodum Sattat Perumakkal. Nindru Odum Sattat Perumakkal. They stand and they chant. Nindrodum Sattat Perumakkal. That's a very lesser known name for the Odhuvar tradition. Tiruppadigam Vinnappam Seivar. Much later they are called as Odhuvar. In fact, interestingly, I think only after the 15th, 16th century they are referred to as the Odhuvar. Till then, it was a very, very respectful title. They were called as Tiruppadigam Vinnappam Seivar. Vinnappam is more like a request or an offer. So here, the Padigam being sung was made as an offering. You request Swami to listen to it being sung. So that's a very beautiful way of being humbled in front of him to say Tiruppadigam Vinnappam Seivar. And here, these are the various titles, names in which they have been addressed to. And almost all of them have been initiated into Shaiva Siddhanta tradition. The Shaiva Agamas, which governs the do's and don'ts in a Shiva temple, talks about both these aspects. One is to make poems in regional language a part of religious rituals. During the specific occasions where you have a 5-part service or a 6-part service in a temple, in each of the service that happens, after the 4 Vedas are rendered and maybe a couple of Agamas, Slokas are being rendered, you will have to balance it with music from regional language. Interestingly, the Agamas talks about both Tamil and Bengali, the Bhasha of Gaudadesam. It talks about the language of Gaudadesha. It doesn't call it Bengali. It talks about Gaudadesha and the language from there. So there have been schools of Shaivism where regional language has been a tool in singing his praise, both in East Indian language also. So here we have the Tamil tradition, which has been strengthened by the Tevaram verses. So when you see a Shiva temple, it is a beautiful sight to see the temple priest, the Shivacharya, standing probably in the Ardha Mandapam, which is the antechamber in front of the Garbhagriha, and doing all the Dhupam, Deepam, Naivedyam and the Upachar during the puja, as the puja happens. And mind you, nobody should be occupying the Garbhagriha when all of this happens. The priest will have to restrict his entry into the Garbhagriha himself. So he has to take the Mandapam before the Garbhagriha, and from there he will have to wave the lamps and the Dhupam and all that. And just outside, the Mandapam outside it, on either sides of the entrance, either sides of the threshold, to the left, when you stand facing the god, will be this Veda Pandita, Adhyayana Bhattar as he is called, and he renders selected verses from the Vedas, from all the 4 Vedas and maybe some Agamas too. And to balance him on the other side, just next to the threshold, where you have the Odhuvar, who sings verses from the Tirumurai. And the ancient tradition was to sing at least one song from each of the 12 Tirumurai. So that's an elongated, a very long offering of 12 verses it's set to various raga. And this is exactly where language comes. So, not that one language managed to get inside and one was forcefully made to stand outside. Traditionally, both these linguistic offerings, the language-based, religious chants are to happen from the same entrance. In fact, inside the Garbhagriha, nobody gets to talk anything. It is the Garbhagriha, nobody gets to talk anything. Even when you perform an archani, the priest who enters the Garbhagriha can only offer the flowers. The names of the gods, are to be chanted by a paricharaka or an assistant to the priest standing outside the Garbhagriha. That is very clearly mentioned. Unfortunately, we have lost people. Yeah, we don't have so many in payrolls, we don't have so many in attendance to take up all of this. So hardly there is one priest who doubles up as the cook also. Probably when needed a plumber, he doubles up as an Odhuvar also. He carries the Tirumanjanam water there. He gets the garlands himself, and this is exactly where we are today. Back then, when each of the designation was clearly marked, you had both these poetry, both the Sanskrit and Tamil, standing at the same entrance door and offering it to Shiva to please his ears. One in this and the other that side. It was very clear. this is where the privilege of the Odhuvars comes in, and they were well paid and respected in the social structure. So here you have, and so they were initiated into the Shaiva Siddhanta tradition. So they were given a diksha. When you are given a diksha, there is a diksha namam with which you have to be identified. So for them, it was mostly from the inscriptions you get to see the place, their ancestral village is referred first, their name, followed by Dharma Shivam, Agora Shivam, Ishana Shivam. It should always end with Shivam as a suffix. So that's your Diksha Nama. So this is how professionally they were addressed by individual names. And predominantly inscriptions talking about Odhuvars talks about remunerations to them, talks about land donations that were made to the temple, the money from which, the income from which goes into paying the Odhuvar Murtigal. And that land was clearly marked and was referred to as Tirupadiya Kani. Kani is the measured parcel of land, and this Kani was exclusively for Tirupadigam Vinnapam Seivar. So it is not under a name of an individual. It was given to the temple with a provision to pay whoever the Odhuvar was. So it was clearly marked, and that was how they were being paid. And many inscriptions talks about the Odhuvars being accompanied by other instruments to enhance their musical offering, and the instruments include Veenai, Pullanduval, Udukkai, Yadakkai, Kaitalam, and all of these instruments too. So you had percussion, you had wind instrument, you had string, these instruments. And in many temples, there is a reference to a mandapam called as Kaikoti Mandapam. A mandapam where the Odhuvars could stand, play talam in their hands, like clapping their hands. So literally, Kai Kottudal is to clap. And so they maintained their rhythm by clapping their hands. And you had the Odhuvars who could stand there and do this musical offering. So those mandapams were called as Kaikoti Mandapam. Very significant temples like Chidambaram and Shirgadi has references to a library which protected a copy of the Tevaram verses. Manuscripts were made. Viragar, they were called. The scribes were called Viragar. And they were in fact paid, an endowment was created for people to make copies of it once in a couple of centuries. The manuscripts are intact for like 300 odd years, 2 to 3 centuries max, if they are well oiled and well maintained. But after which you will have to start making copies of it, and new set of manuscripts will be kept there. So this was a beautiful system to protect the songs and the music too. And you have dancers who performed when the Odhuvars were singing. So there's an inscription in Thiruvattriyur Adipurishwara temple from Veerarajendra's time that talks about how the dancers, there was an endowment for the dancers to perform as the Odhuvars chanted verses from Tiruvachakam. And this one in fact was, the endowment was created by the wife of Veerarajendra Chola. And so this music and dance offering was in turn to protect her Tali Bhagyam, as it says. So so much of specification has also gone into the way they have been engaged in the temple. There are references to a murti of Shiva called as Tevara Nayakam, a bronze icon of Shiva probably, called as Tevara Nayakam, who was housed in the Patasale, to whom most of the classes were addressed to. So when they learn, that is an offering by themselves, by itself. So that will have to happen in front of a murti, and hence you had a Tevara Nayakam. And the Odhuvar Murtigal carried him on their head when they go out in the procession. And during Rajaraja's time, we also have a reference to Tevara Kalluri, quite literally a college to teach Tevaram. And to teach Tevaram is to teach the Odhuvar tradition, the musical aspect of it. So they were into religion, they were into principles, they were into the agamas, they were into Siddhanta Shastras. They know the theology of the religion, and of course music, rhythm, Tamil, poem, temple traditions, all of it. They'll have to be a master of too many arts to be a well-presenting Odhuvar. The first and the oldest inscription that we get today is from this beautiful temple called near Ranipet, Vellur, called Thiruvallam, Vilvanatheshwarar temple. And in this temple, you have the first ever inscription which talks about an endowment created to pay the Odhuvar Murtigal. And it is from Nandivarma Pallava's time. But you don't have the Pallava period inscription. It is in fact a copy of the Pallava period inscription taken much later when the temple was probably renovated. Thankfully, they were courteous enough to make a copy of it before the old wall was probably demolished. So we have this very, very significant inscription. And the inscription goes like this: Tiruppalli Tamam Paripparkum, Tirupadigam Pada Arulinda, Palabani Seivarku, Nell Nanutru Kadiyum. The measured quantity of paddy from this particular field, the limits marked there, goes into paying the people who make garlands to the temple. Tiruppallitamam Seivar. Pallitamam is garland. So people who are into gardening and getting those garlands in place every day. And Tiruppadigam Paduvar. So this is the first reference to the sacred musicians engaged in temples and the way they were paid. Many early Chola temples have reference to appointment of Odhuvars, and those temples include temples near Tiruchi like Allur, Antanallur, Thiruvavadurai. These are all temples from the very early times. All these are almost pre-Rajaraja's time. So before Tanjavur happened, you have references to Odhuvars being appointed. So probably, if anything, Rajaraja's attempt to go and get this set from Chidambaram temple should have been more a process to compile all the works. Maybe the works, the Tevara Padigams were sprinkled here and there. Some of the verses were with the poet, with the Odhuvars here and there. But to make one grand compilation, stack it all together, bring it out in an order, and popularize it through the music is what Rajaraja had probably done. So here we have references to Thirupadigam Vinnapam Seivar, employed in temples like Allur, Andanallur and all. Thirupadigam Vinnapam Seivar as they were called. In fact, there is a inscription from Tiruvizhumalai temple that talks about going along with the procession of the deity, singing the Padigams as he walked. So following the deity with Tirupadigam has been an ancient tradition too. Now this is something that you see even in today's context. The popular procession of Kapali that just got over, every night till it is well past midnight, you see half a dozen Odhu Amurtigal accompanied by musical instruments on the streets all by themselves, following him with beautiful musical offerings. So going along with the deity in his procession, singing the Padigam has its own antiquity too. Pullamangai, this has a very interesting inscription from the times of Rajaraja. The first inscription is from the 12th regnal year, which talks about a land donation being made to pay the Odhu Amurtigal. But almost a decade later, the land that was donated was made tax-free, Irayili as it is called. So majorly any land donated for temple activities to the temple by itself will be made tax-free. So the remuneration can go into paying the individual. Much later, almost a decade later, there is a reference to the same land that is being described, but then the Odhuvars in the temples, the designation was left empty. You don't have an Odhuvar in the temple at all. So the land was brought back into tax fold once again. Now, an order for this was passed by the local Sabai, and there are close to 10-12 of them who have signed this order and say a resolution has been passed, well informed by the Sabai, as there are no more Odhuvars in the temple, the land that has been endowed and made tax-free to pay the Odhuvars can be taxed from now on. And a copy of it is being sent to the central capital and local offices, and they have settled this issue. So appointing Odhuvars and for a period Odhuvars not being in temple and all that starts from the 10th century itself. In another interesting story from Tiruvarambur, which is near outskirts of Trichy today, on Trichy Tanjavur highway, is a beautiful ASI maintained Padal Petra Sthalam called Tiruvarambur, and it's on a small hillock. There you have an early Chola inscription from the times of Gandaraditya Chola. Tiruvarambur is pretty close to Kaveri river, and Kaveri is known for flooding once in a while back then, quite frequently in fact. And a similar problem is faced by the inmates of Srirangam Island also. And Srirangam is shared between Ranganatha Swami and Jambukeshwara, a Shiva temple and a Vishnu temple. Land endowments were protected, the boundaries of the land endowments were protected by erecting stones which had images of Trishula and Sudarshana Chakra. If it was a land given to a Vishnu temple, the boundary, the fencing was marked with the insignia of Sudarshana Chakra. And if it was for a Shiva temple, it had the Trishula, the trident marked on it. And when Kaveri floods, these stones that served as the boundary line were all washed away. And after it settles, there was always a feud that came up about boundary, about finding the fencing there. And so a new measurement had to happen, and both of them will have to pay a price for it. Until all of this happened, the feud continued and it was never settled. There are enough inscriptions in Srirangam which talks about settling these feuds between the temple administration of Thiruvanekka and Thiruvarangam, probably monsoon after monsoon. And here a similar problem happens in Tiruvarambur, where there is a Chaturvedi Mangalam close by, the next village, and land donations made to the temple there were abutting the land donations made to Tiruvarambur Mahadevar Kovil. And so every time there was a monsoon, a flood, and the boundary stones were washed away, and they were fighting between it. And there was one particular such land feud which continued for a little more than 4 or 5 years. That was the times of Gandaraditya Chola, and the produce from the land was just being wasted. Nobody coming forward to plow it because there was litigation happening. When something is litigated, you don't go close to it. So there was this land which was left. And so Gandaraditya wanted to sort this out and tried it by sending a couple of ministers. Nobody could find a solution. He called members from both the villages and tried the conversation, but no peace could be achieved. Then there was this one proactive officer whom Gandaraditya said, please go, settle it and come back. And so he was all set to settle it come what may. Went there, after multiple talks between both of them, he promised to settle it between them by buying it from both of them individually. He said, from my pocket, I will pay you whatever this land costs. And the same thing to the other village also. So to both Thiruvarambur and the Chaturvedi Mangalam, he bought it. He bought the same piece of land from two different owners and said, let us sort it out here. Now it belongs to neither. It is mine. I will take it over. But it is after all an endowment made for the devotees of Shiva. So a dharmic minister there, he will not be happy to buy it and take it with him. What he did was, he created an endowment, a new endowment with the boundaries very clearly marked, and gave it to the Tirupathigam Vinnapam Seivar of Thiruvarambur Kovil, not anyone else. He said, if this is settled, if it is to make some profit, let it please be with the Odhuvars, the Tirupathigam Vinnapam Seivar. And he said, this is how I settled it. Gandaraditya should have been probably very happy because this was approved and it gets inscribed on the stone wall. So a very interesting way of settling issues, especially boundary issues, by paying both the parties and buying it and sorting it once and for all. So here you have that inscription about the Odhuvars. A very, very interesting inscription. To me personally, of all the Odhuvar inscriptions, this is my most favorite. Similar inscription in two different temples from two different periods. The first temple is called Tiruppalanam. It is very near Thiruvayaru on the banks of Kaveri. A very small village but has a grand, beautiful temple. Grand as in not an edifice, not tall and big, but it is poetic, extremely beautiful. A subtle beauty is what it is. The early Chola temples, the very celebrated circuit of early Chola temples in and around Thiruvayaru, apart from, other than Thiruvayaru, all the other 6 temples around it, the Saptasthanam circuit as it is called, are all from early Chola period, predominantly Aditya the First, and poetic, each of them are. Completely built out of stone, till the Kalasam, you have this little village called Tiruppalanam, the temple dedicated to Shiva as Avatsahayeswara, with this beautiful Vimanam there, the stone Vimanam that you see there. And there is an inscription in this temple which talks about Odhuvars being appointed, but exclusively they were differently abled. They were visually challenged. They were visually challenged. He said, let them be employed. They can listen, they can learn, and then sing it in front of the God. Let them be employed. And then, after almost 4 or 5 generations, in his lineage comes Kulotunga the Great. So this gentleman followed suit, and in another village, in another town called Thiruamattur, which is near Dindivanam, Viluppuram, right on the Grand South Front Road, you have Thiruamattur, a grand temple complex in fact, and there you have a similar inscription which talks about not 1 or 2 but close to 14 or 16 Odhuvar Murtigal, all of whom were visually challenged. Visually challenged. So spread across 150 odd years, you have 2 inscriptions from 2 different towns, one in Kaveri Delta region, other near Viluppuram. But both the cases, the people employed were Odhuvars who were visually challenged. But in the case of Thiruamattur, there are 2 other people employed who are referred to as Kankattuvar. People who enabled these Odhuvars to be walked to the temple and back. So together it was treated as a designation of 18 employees. The Odhuvar Murtigal were there, and then the Kankattuvar as they are addressed to. People who wear their eyesight, quite literally, to hold on to them, walk them to the temple and back.
What is the Odhuvars without their eyesight called?
They are called as Kanparviyatra, the word that we generally don't use. So that's how it is referred to. So you have these 2 inscriptions from 2 different periods, 2 different geographical locations. The subject is similar, and here it is just appreciated for the way differently able were treated then and giving them a chance, being inclusive. This that. For me personally, for long I was like, if this can be done, I'm sure there should be more people who were probably visually challenged, and many other temples also could have probably accommodated them. Why so specific about these 2 temples? And I personally think Appar Swamigal had sung both these places in the 5th Tirumurai called Thirukkurundogai. And interestingly, I found something very common between these 2 places being made as a subject in the composition. In the Tiruppalanam Padigam, the 4th Tirumurai, Appar Swamigal sings, and that's what it is. Manpurundi Valbavarkum, Matirtha Vediyarkum, Vinpurundu Devarkum, Veedu Perai Nindranai, Panpurundu Isaipadum, Padanam Ser Appanai, Yen Kanpurundum Podahattum, Kaividanan Kadaveni. He says, when my eyes black out, I shall not give up on you. I shall not give up on the Lord of Tiruppalanam, who is being sung set to various pun. So there is a clear reference to musical offerings being done to this god of Tiruppalanam, and roughly translated by V. Subramania Iyer's translation, just quoting it here. Shivan, who was freedom from sufferings and attainment of eternal bliss, to the people who live in this earth, to the very pure Brahmins, to the Tevaram who live in the heaven, the celestials, and my father in Palanam, where music is sung to the appropriate melodies, will I give upon thinking of him even as my sight blacks out. So he's actually said, even when my eyes black out, will I give upon singing your praise. Singing the Lord of Palanam, who is, worshipped through beautiful songs. So there is this musical aspect and eyes being blinded. And as if this is not enough, at Tiruvamattur, you have the fifth Tirumurai, Kurundogai of Upper Swamigal, which makes a similar reference. Pannil Padalgal Pattisai Vittaharke, Annithu Agum Amudinai, Amattur, Sandipane, Tamar Kanidayado, Kannir Palayam, Anavan Kanmine. This is for people, the king of Amatur, and again I read the translation of V. Subramania here. Shivan, who is the nectar that tastes sweet to those skilled persons who have devotion by singing songs with melody types, who dwell in Amatur, people of this world, you know that he is as precious as the pupil of the eye and is near at hand to his devotees. He calls the Lord of Amatur as the pupil of the eye of people who sing to him the melodious hymns. Now, to me personally, this should have been the only inspiration for Aditya I and his successor, Kulotunga, to be specific about appointing Odhuvars who were vision impaired in these two temples alone and take some special care. Now, kings who were ruling almost all of South India and extended took it upon themselves to fall in love with the verses. It would have been easy for Kulothungan to just pass one jiva and say, make sure every temple has specific number of Odhuvars. Just make sure they are well versed, get them appointed, I'll sign the order. That's very easy for him. But here, you have a Padigam of Appar, which is so specific about people whose eyesight is challenged or blackout, and then they say, this Lord will help them if they render melodious music to him, if they worship him with music. And so what would be a better choice than to get, this is my hypothesis, I might be wrong, but these two songs specific from Appar Padigam, the fourth and the fifth Tirumurai respectively from these two temples, probably should have been an inspiration to these two great kings to appoint Odhuvars who were visually impaired. Tanjavur, of course, that's where the breaker happens. You have Rajaraja I who built a temple which was as prescribed in the Agamas, nourishing it with all forms of luxury, making sure every service in the temple was happening through liberal endowments, and his personal interest should have been the Tirupadigam Vinnapam Seivar. And in this temple they are referred to as Pidarargal. Pidara. That's definitely a Sanskrit word. I personally feel it should, a Tamilized Sanskrit word. Probably Bhattaraka should have given rise to Pidara, and Bhattaraki to Pidari, of course. So Bhattarakas, as they were called, very well versed in the Vedas. That's how they are referred to. The Bhattacharya and Bhattarakas. So they were at par with the temple priests themselves. And there were 48 of them in attendance to sing the verses, and 2 of them to accompany with musical instruments to support them. And some of the names from the inscription, this is how it goes. Balan, Thiruvanchiyattu Adigalana, Rajaraja Pichan Sadashivan. Thiruvanchiyattu Adigalana is about his ancestry from Thiruvanchiyam, which is of course near Kaveri Delta, Mayavaram. And so he's from Thiruvanchiyam, and his Diksha Namam is Sadashivan. So every Odhuvar should have this Diksha Namam, which has Shivan as the prefix. Then you have Thiruvennaval, Semporchodiyana, Dakshina Vidanga, Pichan Jnana Shivan. Thiruvennaval is Thiruvanekka, where the Shweta Jambu Vriksham is the Sthala Vriksham, and hence Vennaval. So he's from Thiruvanekka, and he's called as Dakshina Vidanga Pichan Jnana Shivan. Semporchodi, that's his name too. Probably that's what his parents named him. So his actual name, along with his Diksha Namam, with his ancestry, all of it comes here. And then you have Arayan, Anukkan, Thirumarai Kadanana, Dharma Shivan. Thirumarai Kada is Vedaranyam. So somebody from Vedaranyam called as Dharma Shivan. This is how each of their names are referred to in the inscriptions. Thanks to those times when Aadhaar cards didn't exist. So, 13 character restrictions and all that. And there is a long list of accompanying instruments about Udukkai, Edakkai, and the Kaitalam and all of these instruments too. So they were always singing and making these offerings from with music. And Dr. R. Nagaswamy's hypothesis that the long first floor provision, atop the Maha Mandapam, probably accommodated the 400 Tevaradiyar who were employed in the temple to dance, accompanied by the 48 Odhuva Murtigal to sing and the two of them to play instruments. Of course, not that every day, other day, all 450 of them were in attendance, but yeah, there was a large hall where such performances accommodating a large number of dancers were probably possible. Daily chants, there is a prescription. So the Odhuvars, pretty much like the Vedic tradition, also have selected padigams that are to be chanted during different parts of the day. So the pan that is to be chanted in the morning and the evening, because there are pagal pan, irap pan, and then there are common pan too, the podu pan as it is called. So Mullai pan should have been the mother of all these pan, from which several alterations have happened, and you have a range of pan to choose from. And Navasandhi pan, when there is a temple festival and the Bali Devar is taken out, you would have seen in Shiva temples where an image of the Trishulam is taken out first, preceding the major procession. So the Trishulam is taken out on the streets, and in every junction of all the 4 street corners and the middle of the roads, they will offer a bali to the directional gods, and there, as a part of the Upacharam, specific pan are to be rendered. It is still followed quite religiously at Tiruvaru Tyagaraja Swami temple. In fact, the segments of all the 4 streets, half segments of each street, the specific pan to be rendered and the songs to be played in the instrument are all mentioned, and it is followed too. During the later Nayaka period, there is a general opinion that the Odhuvars weren't really taken care of after the 14th, 15th century. To a good extent, yes. But a very interesting reference to the Odhuvars of Madurai temple, who trace not 1 or 2, but a little more than 12 generations or 15 generations of their forefathers. And to them, there is a copper plate inscription, a Tamra Sasanam, given by none but Sri Tirumalai Nayaka. And right there in the center of the copper plate, his name alone is etched in Telugu. Sri Tirumalai Nayaka, his name is etched in Telugu, and the rest of the copper plate is in Tamil. It talks about a village called Sengulam, or today O Sengulam, and the O there stands for Odhuvar. So the land that was gifted to the Odhuvars, Odhuvar Sengulam, that was given to. So from the 17th century, Tirumalai Nayaka's copper plate to an Odhuva Murtigal called Tandava Murti Odhuvar. He is from the 17th century. The family lineage thankfully continues till date. I think in this family tree, Tandava Murti Odhuvar comes somewhere here. Yeah, that's Tandava Murti Odhuvar, and my friend's name is right here. So this is what they have traced, and this family tree was thankfully published during his wedding as a part of his invitation itself. So to document it, and they still have the copper plate, and so they have this village. The village exists, the copper plate exists. That's it. It's called Odhuvar Sengulam, somewhere near Melur, if I'm right. So that's a village in total gifted to the Odhuva Murtigal. And this is the grandfather of my friend, Sri the Odhuva Murtigal of Madurai, Guruswami Desikar as he is called. So he was one of those stalwart Odhuvars of the last century, in fact. He was active till a couple of years back, and he was a moving library of music, and he was the personal favorite of several political leaders and popular figures of Tamil Nadu in the last couple of decades. So with such melody, his renderings were with just ease. I mean, the first thing that immediately any musician would want when you request him or her for a song is to set the Shruti. That one thing that I've seen with the Odhuvars is the Shruti is so well embedded in them. They don't immediately go in search of a Shruti app on their phone the moment you request them to sing. Immediately, it just starts. It just starts. And let me tell you, there is no lapse of Shruti. There is no lapse of Shruti at all. It travels perfectly in a parallel line with the Shruti, which is so natural and inbuilt in them. It might be raw, it might not be silky or cosmetic, but the richness of music in the way they render is unparalleled. That's how they are trained probably. And that's about the inscription part. A couple of temples where images of Odhuvars have been kept and worshipped. To the best of my knowledge, there are 3 places where it has been documented. Sri Kudavai Balasubramaniam sir has beautifully documented these temples where the images of Odhuvars are seen. And one commonly misinterpreted set of images are from Dharasuram. When you go around the temple, the northern corridor has a row full of images of devotees standing in one long row, in fact 108 exactly in number. There are these figures of people very similar in pose, attributes, standing in Anjali Hastam in one full row. One full row. And that is each of them labeled with their names at the pedestal level. Each of them are one of those Shivams or the Odhuvars. The Pataras, the Pidaras, who were engaged in Dharasuram temple. So the temple had close to 108 Odhuvars who were employed once upon a time. Rajaraja II, of course, takes credit for this beautiful poetry in stone, and you had the musicians, the Odhuvars, engaged there to sing his praise. This is a very rare occasion of the Odhuvars in employment being represented as an image. Probably people might come, might go, but these images are going to be eternal. Yeah, so they are still there in theme to sing his praise. And this is another one-off occasion in a not so old temple, around 17th, 18th century temple, in a little village called Kulasegarapatnam near Tiruchendur, where the Dasara festival is very popular. And the Shivan temple there, right in front of the Dvajastambham, 4 Odhuva Murtigal and their life-size images, 5 feet tall probably, with their names again on the pedestal. You get to see it. You have Pandara Shiva Odhuva Murtigal, Kumaraswamy Odhuva Murtigal, Saravana Odhuva Murtigal, Sivachidambara Odhuva Murtigal. All 4 of them in the traditional attire with a Shiravatam or a garland of Rudraksha placed on their tonsured head, and the Rudraksha Mala in appropriate places, size, standing there in front of the deity. So this is another rare occasion. One more place where you see an image of Odhuvar, the picture for which I couldn't unfortunately get, is from this lesser known temple in Sri Mushnam. The Vishnu temple there is very popular. It's a grand temple complex dedicated to Vishnu as Bhuvara Swami. One temple many of us might miss is maintained by the ASI. Just next to the temple, very close to the Vishnu temple, is a Shiva temple called dedicated to Shiva as Nidishwara. And there in the temple, right in front of Swami, standing in Anjali Hastam, is an image of an Odhuvar who is believed to have attained Shivagati as he was in service rendering padigams to Swami. So in memory of that service of his image is being placed right in front of Swami. So to the best of my knowledge, I think these are very rare occasions where you see an image. So that's how they stand in a row. So all 4 columns, one next to another, so their images are standing there. In a day, their duty starts with Tripalli early in the morning when the deity is woken up from his Yoga Nidra, and it generally ends with rendering Tiruponnunjal, which is from Tiruvachakam, which talks about Shiva being placed in a swing and sway, swiftly accompanied by music. So that's the closing ceremony for the temple. And then you have the Arukala Puja, and each of the column will have a specific pan, padigams sung in those pan to be rendered in front of God, and they generally sing it with cymbals that they play with their own hands, or in some temples they are accompanied by other musical instruments too. So all the 6 parts of the service. There cannot be a service which gets over without rendition of what is called as Dravida Vedam. This is Vedam, and hence pretty much like how Vedam is chanted by first chanting the Pranavam and then completing it also with Pranavam. You have the tradition of opening your rendition by chanting Tiruchitrambalam and then closing it also by chanting Tiruchitrambalam. So it's Tiruchitrambalam as a very mystic word which expands into all of these Tamil verses. So you start and close it with the repetition of the same term. And so the Odhuvar's presence in every service is a mandate. And it is a nice scene to see in some temples. The priests, the Shivacharyas themselves have, out of love, learned several padigams, and with beautiful voice they have chanted it also. So there are rare occasions where you can actually see them in service in a temple where they render the padigams also. So that's how captivating it is. Different songs at different shrines. So at the shrine of Shiva you have the Panchapuranam. So that's like 1 verse from Tevaram, 1 from Tiruvachakam, 1 from Thiru Isaipa, 1 from Tirupallandu, and 1 from Puranam or Periya Puranam. That's a collection of 5 songs. The Odhuvars are specific enough to bring songs which has deeper meaning or contextual too. So on a specific day, if it's a Kritika day, a day that is associated with Subramanya, they will choose padigams which might have a reference to Murugan. Though it is dedicated to Shiva, it will have a reference to Murugan. Likewise, when they go to the shrine of Ambal, they will sing padigams from Kanchipuram where Kamakshi's Shiva Puja is mentioned in the Tevaram. So they are very specific about the context and setting it right. So that there is a theme with which you can also engage, and your prayers are enhanced. Your mood is enhanced by listening to those padigams, which makes more better context to the specific shrine. And today, of course, they've mastered several later period works also, which includes Tirupugal, Kandar Anubhuti, Andadi, and several works of Arunagirinadar and Kumara Guruvarar, Gurunyana Sambandha Swamigal, Gurunyana Sambandha Paramacharya Swamigal, the first Acharya of Dharmapuram. There are several other Acharyas, Taimanava Swamigal, and so they render those songs also. And most recently, from 20th century poets like Pamban Swamigal probably, their verses have also been brought into musical context by some of the Odhuvars and they rendered it. But traditionally, it was only the 12 Tirumurais. There have been Odhuvars who were strongly opposing the notion of rendering works by anybody outside the list of the 12 Tirumurai. That has been there too. It has been in the recent past that they were liberal enough to make it more accommodative of other Padigams. So, and then you have the 12 Tirumurai Vinnappam. Either the Panchapuranam, 5 songs, one from Tevaram, Tiruvachakam, Tiruvishaipa, Pallandu, Puranam, or one from each Tirumurai. This is unfortunately a long lost tradition. Fortunately, it is still protected only in Tiruvarur temple, where in front of Tyagaraja Swami, all through the day, every service by the Odhuvar will mandate singing at least one song from each Tirumurai. The others have reduced it to 5 songs, but here, one song from each Tirumurai has got to be rendered. And Tiruvarur is a very, very rare shrine, which is the only shrine, in fact, finding its reference in all the 12 Tirumurai. In fact, for a Ganapati Homam or otherwise, the Odhuvars were trained by themselves. So they mastered those Shastras also to perform it, which means they will have their own Acharya Abhishekam, where they are initiated or raised to the status of being a guru to extend the service to others. So they have been Acharyas also after undergoing Acharya Abhishekam. So such traditions are also there. They are called as Desigargal or Gurukal in some case. In the Kaveri Delta region, to several communal denominations of the Shaivites, you have the Odhuvars who develop as the family Gurukal or Brohidar too. And some of them have worked on aspects like publications to bringing out a lot of works. Sri Pattaswami Odhuvar from Tiruchirappalli, the Rockford Temple, Taimano Swami Devasthanam has, with the support of Tirupanandal Thirumadam, Kashi Thirumadam, they have managed to bring out several works which were proofread and approved by Sri Pattaswami Desikar. So apart from Tevaram, they were into Agamas, they were into other languages, they have mastered the Siddhanta Shastras, they knew it all. So they were walking encyclopedias of Shaiva tradition too. And during special occasions, during Guru Puja or annual Brahmotsavam or other specific festivals, they always engaged in the temple with those contexts. And at Guru Pujas, especially in Adinams, Guru Puja is the day that a specific Acharya attained Shivagati. In Shaiva tradition, we don't celebrate their Avatarotsavam, be it of Jnana Sambandhar, Appar Swamigal or Sundarar. Their birth is not an area for celebration. In fact, they attaining Shivagati is what is celebrated. So when somebody calls it a Guru Puja, it only means that the specific person has attained Shivagati on that day. So here, during all the Guru Pujas in their Avatar Sthalam, be it Tirupugalur, where Appar Swamigal attained Shivagati, or Achalpuram, where Jnana Sambandhar attained Shivagati, the celebration generally extends into a 10-day festival where several miracles performed by them through Padigams are reenacted. So the Odhuvars are requested to come camp there, stay there for the next 10 days. The Adinams or the other donors host them. Yeah, so they are remunerated and they are there from morning to evening rendering songs. And in most of these temples, the evening procession goes well close to midnight or sometimes even post midnight. So they are there all through the day to serve the Lord, sing and praise Him. So in order to facilitate these extended services, several philanthropists, especially in the 19th and the 20th century, came forward to build chowtries or madams in many of these prominent Shaivite shrines. Chidambaram has a dozen of these madams run by several philanthropists. You have several Chettiars, popular names from Karaikudi region, who have extended their service by building these madangal and padashalai, which can also host Odhuvars from other parts of the state during special occasions. And in fact, a few annual festivals that happens in Chidambaram, for that matter, the Guru Puja of Sundaramurti Swamigal, which falls on the Adimasam Swati star, has been popular for several decades. The doyens of the specific period make sure they are there, and all through the night there is Vidhi Parayanam of Sundaramurti Swamigal's Tevaram. And I can recall a couple of my relatives, well in their 70s, who used to take a bus, go there, only to be there awake all through the night, walk with them on the streets. They'll walk for like 100 meters, sit on the road, literally, like 80, 60, 70 of them, all like a choir. They just sit on the road and continue the rendition. This goes on till early morning. And a similar service is also happens in the concluding day of the Brahmotsavam of Ekambareshwara Swami at Kanchipuram, the Tirumurai festival as it is called. In many Shiva temples, the annual festival gets over with a day's celebration of the Tirumurai. When, like the deity being brought out in procession, a collection of the 12 Tirumurai books are placed on a mound and it is taken out in a procession where the Odhuvar Murtigals carry it and they go around the street singing those Padigams. At Kanchipuram, again, I can recall with relatives there, some of my own uncles and all, they go stay there and make sure they participate in it year after year. It is their dose of protein to be there and participate in it once a year. That's a rare occasion where all the top-notch Odhuvars come together. You can be assured that the best of the Odhuvars will be there that night, and it is a rare occasion to miss. It's a very rare occasion to miss, so they'll participate in it. So these special occasions, best part is in some of these services, they're not even remunerated for it. And that is not what they look forward to. It is an annual offering to the Tirumurais that helps them make a living. And this is an occasion where they can meet each other and exchange their ideas and talk about it. So they're all there, and bare minimum is to host them in a madam, offer them food and probably some travel conveyance, so they're there to participate in it. So such traditions are there till today. And in the last couple of decades, especially after the 15th, 16th century, it has come into a kind of a school education, a formal system. So there is a 5-year course plan, which is what is adapted and used in many of these Padashalais, and the foremost of it being the Padashalai run by Dharmapuram Adinam, which is near Mayavaram. And so starting in 1941, till then they had their own issues to sort with the East India Company coming in and several legal battles being fought and all that. Once they settled and got back all the wealth, the first thing that they probably invested was to start a Padashalai for Tirumuraigal. And in 1941, and it is almost 85 years now, they've been doing this Padashalai, which does not take a fees and host them with food and all their basic requirements, everything is taken care of, goes in a traditional way, and 5 years of coursework. And they make sure that the children are engaged as early as 6 or 7 years of age, because that's when their tonal value can be adapted to singing. It is not easy to adapt it when you're 30s or 40s. So when the little kid is 6 or 7, they pick and they're appointed, they're employed with the school, and so they're admitted and they'll learn. And that goes on till they're 12 or 14 probably, extends into 12 or 14. By then, they are trained in temple traditions. They are taken to several festivals by their acharyas. They get trained. They get trained to take that little nap when there is so much of noise happening inside the temple. Take a little bite when the festival is on. Just go to a side and have a mouthful, and then come wash your hands, come join. So all of these little traditions, they are brought into it in those 5 or 7 years. So that's being done by them. And then you have they are supposed to by heart the padigams, know the meaning of it, which will mean they will have to know Tamil grammar, a basic working knowledge in Tamil grammar, and meters, the pavagaigal, and so that is one aspect, one vertical. Then you have the religious aspects of it. You should be knowing about Jnana Sambandha, you should be knowing about Appar Swamigal, you should know the Nayanmar, you should know the Sthalams, you should know the Sthala Varalaru, you should know differences, you should know similarities. This is on one end. Then you should be knowing about the Guru Paramparai, what is to be sung, what is not to be sung, what is ours, what is not. So these differences, and above all this, the social life of that individual, how he's going to face the rest of his life. So the economics of life is also taught as a part of it. So the tradition is to offer them bare minimum. If they are students still and come along like an apprentice, they are still given a minimum offering which they are taught to save and use it. So slowly in a Gurukulam fashion, they are taught. So they should have a knowledge of rhythm. They should know to probably handle a couple of instruments when there is a need. So 18,000 odd songs, and then you have several hundreds like Tirupugal and others included. So at least even 10 or 20% of it to by heart and know the musical differences and to chant it. And the tradition goes that you don't have a book in your hand when you enter. So what you say is to be by hearted when you sing. So that is required in fact. And so they should know, in temple traditions, Saivite history, significance, the philosophy also. Because Shaiva Siddhantam is there in the compositions. You see the philosophy embedded. You should be knowing the philosophy also. And above all, in the recent times, the modern education. It is a Guru Sishya lineage because it's a Dravida Vedam. And hence, like a Veda Padashalai, adhering to strict norms, they stay with their Guru, Guru Patni, and learn it from them. And very recently, on the 22nd of March, when a day's celebration was hosted for the Odhuvars, I can recall one of the senior Odhuvars, Sri Palani Shanmughandra Desikar, who served the Lord of Palani Hills, recalled his early days being with his gurus. And when he was telling about how the guru and his wife emphasized or insisted on taking oil bath on Wednesdays and Saturdays, forcing them when they tried to run, and very, very motherly in nature, and he actually started weeping. Addressing an audience of like 1,100 people, he actually started weeping. So it was very, very personal a touch that they had. Pretty much a very, very traditional Padashalai that they have been running. And they call it as Thinnai Pallikodam. The Thinnai outside the residence of the Guru extends into a Pallikodam. So morning they probably eat the leftovers from the previous night, fermented rice, kanji, sit there and learn it for the next 3 hours. Then they have a lunch, or sometimes they have the practice sessions early in the morning. Then they go to the Kaveri, take a dip there, have some time for themselves, come back. Then the day starts. So it's a very, very traditional school where they have learnt it all. So, and as I told you, there have been occasions where they managed to make copies of Tirupadigams and earned a meager living out of it too. In the 15th century, with a lot of things changing in Tamil Nadu, the cultural, socio-cultural and political map of Tamil Nadu changing, language issues were something that they faced, especially in the courts of the Marathas and the Vijayanagara kings, where Tamil was not recognized per se, though it was in use and all that, but official language for communication was insisted to be Sanskrit and Maratha or Telugu and Kannada, with Tamil not being given the same status as it was previously. But again, make me very clear, not that it was cornered or anything like that. The Odhuvars have existed, Tamil as a language was there. In fact, some of the finest piece of work, literature, evolved during that time. But official language, several foreign languages, several other languages were introduced, and when it was gelling into, when it was one hot pot of melting culture, the Tamil as the unique identity of this part of India was had to meet other languages also and gel with it. Even during those occasions, thankfully, the Adinams came forward to support Tamil as a language through Vidwan courses, Tirumuraigal, rendering of these Tirumurais. One of those huge corpus deposits of the Adinams are with the Odhuvar Palligal. And so to say, with great pride, Dharmavaram Adinam spearheaded this, and till date, they are the ones who have been doing maximum service when it comes to protecting the Odhuvar culture and tradition. So, impact of Carnatic music. In fact, Mu Arunachalam, the great scholar who authored Tamil Isai Varalaru in several volumes, talks about how the Pannisai tradition was wrongly identified by one of the Hoysala kings in the 12th, 13th century. And he, being from Karnataka, wanted to call it Karnataka Sangeetam, and that is in Manasolasam, one of his works, is the first reference to a school of music called Carnatic music. And with migration from both Karnataka and Andhra, especially in the Kaveri Delta, when human beings migrate, culture also migrates with them. So language, dressing, festival calendar, food, way you prepare food, culinary skills, everything kind of gets gelled up. So that's when major changes happen. And with Carnatic music, as we call it today, coming into it, and the Odhuvar tradition, which probably preceded it, had to gel with each other and to see the popularity, to see what common public wanted, to take it forward with or without the support from the government and other philanthropists. It was quite a challenging period from the 15th to the 16th, 17th, or even the 18th century. That being said, several Tamil poets, musicians evolved during that time. So to say, the Tamil mover, or in the 18th century, you had Gopalakrishna Bharatiyar, several of them, in fact, many Prabandhams that you see were authored during that time. When I say Prabandham, not the Divya Prabandham, the later period Tamil works, several Kuravanchi, several Ula, many such works were authored then, and the ruling kings from Tanjavur court did promote it. People like Ganam Krishna Iyer or Kottayur Shivakonda Deshikar, several of those authors, they were all active during this time. So it was a period of exchanges and gelling together of culture, where the impact was being shared by all the schools. So that was also happening. And at that time, it was the Patasali, especially those taken care of and supported by the Chettiar community, including the Patasalis at Tirukkalar, Kottayur near Karaikudi, and Kilapungudi near Madurai. It was happening in Madurai. Vedaranyam, for that matter. Vedaranyam had been a hub of Odhuvars. Several families of Odhuvars hail from Vedaranyam. So all of these places had these Patasalis that were what that could make. And there is this one name that I would be happy if you can remember, called Adangan Murai Arunachala Deshikar. He is the only person so far in Tamil history who had managed to by heart all the 7 Tirumurai end to end. End to end. He knew it all by heart. That's roughly totaling up to 8,000 songs. He knew it end to end by heart. He's the only gentleman called Adangan Murai Arunachala Deshikar. So he was in fact requested by the Kottayur Padasale to be there at Karaikudi and teach the students in the Padasale. The community of Chettiar there believed that setting up these Padasales and philanthropy towards it will help them. It was considered a Shivapunyam, and so they had extended that service too. But this gentleman was so particular, having mastered it end to end, said that he will never perform any musical performances. even when he was invited in the weddings of the Chettiars themselves, or the Sashtya Purti or such, Mangala occasions, he used to send his students there. To him, rendering of these padigams were only for God, only in temple. So the mastery there would have fetched him a lot more in money when he could sing in kacheri. But he said, no choice of singing in kacheri. My music is only for the God. And so he offered it only in temple. So Adangan Murai Arunachala Deshikarasi is called. Role of Dharmapuram Adinam, the first formal Pathashala by an Adinam happened in 1941 in the North Street of Dharmapuram. And in fact, this picture, if you can see, that's the old Pathashala, a beautiful vernacular house with large thinnai which could develop as classrooms, a central huge courtyard, tiled roof, and those colonial influence very clearly seen in the architectural elements, all of which, and unfortunately, major part of it were gotten old and it was cracking and falling much beyond conservation. So the last 5-6 years, it was brought down and a similar looking new structure has been built, and they're accommodating close to 70 students. But the best part is they're given formal education also. They, apart from getting trained into Odhuvar education, they appear to their 12th boards. And if they are interested, the Adinam runs its own college, so they can get into arts and science and other humanities courses also. And as the first time ever, the current Acharya of Dharmapuram had invested a fixed deposit of 1 lakh for each of the student with the certificate in the name of the student. If and when they complete the coursework and when they go out, that money is given to them as a token of love and affection for the children, for the challenge that they have taken forward in life to choose this for a profession. In a very rare occasion, that's like 60 children, and that's what is happening there. And in the Adinam's daily schedule, the Odhuvars are placed only next to the junior pontiffs of the Adinam. So there are several of these Adiyar Trikootam, as they are called, the junior pontiffs, who are sannyasis, and just next to them you have the Odhuvars. So in giving prasadam or being seated in the lunchroom for the midday meal, in all those places the presidence is there for the Odhuvars. And any occasion like a Kumbhabhishekam or a Guru Puja is a mandate to award a title, citation, and a medal to an Odhuvar. And the package, a standard package, includes 1 sovereign of gold medal, 5,000 rupees in cash, a citation, and a grand sadhara, a shawl which is very specific to Dharmapuram Adinam. So this is what they have done. And the last 6 years, ever since this Acharya came to the Peetham, close to 300 such Odhuvars and artists and Shivacharyas have all been recognized. That's like 300 sovereigns of gold has been gifted to people who, with titles recognizing their yeoman service. So these are those aspects in which they serve the Odhuvar tradition and make sure it keeps going. So in every probable occasions they are felicitated. Tirumulaipal festival is one of the most important festival in Dharmapuram Adinam at Shirgaji. It recalls the occasion where Uma Devi appeared in front of Jnana Sambandha as a little kid who was crying and fed him the Jnanapal. So on that day, they celebrated with recognizing Odhuvars and their tradition. So several traditions in Dharmapuram puts them forward. And Upper Guru Puja at Tiruvamur. Tiruvamur is the birthplace of Upper. So at Tiruvamur, they felicitate an old Odhuvar because Upper entered the faith system when he was very old, and so an aged Odhuvar is recognized there. And there are several occasions like Avani Moolam where all night Akanda Parayanam of Padigams happens. And as you can see in one of the pictures there, the Adinam will be actually seated all through the night, surrounded by several Odhuvars singing Padigams through the night. It start by around 10:30, 11 in the night and go on till 4 or 5. So these are some of those areas where the Odhuvars and their traditions are recognized. Current scenario in the 20th century, thanks to Tamil Sai Changam, they played a major role in shaping the Odhuvar tradition as it is seen today. So they facilitated several annual conferences where the best of the Odhuvars were all invited to participate, and they gave them a stage to discuss, debate, argue, fight between, come to some conclusion. All that they wanted was to come to a conclusion about how Padigams are going to be rendered. So several beautiful arguments have actually happened, and thanks to their archiving tendency, they've documented several of these debates. And it is for us to see and read and understand the point of view of several of these scholars, well versed in Carnatic music also. Around the 20th century, if you're a musician, you should be knowing Carnatic music. That was made a mandate for any performer for that matter. I mean, best of the film actors were all basically musicians, right, back then in the early 20th century. So several of these Odhuvars who were masters of Carnatic music, who could call a ragam in their sleep, they were all hired and brought to Chennai, and at their the grand auditorium at Esplanade, they were made to come up with these conclusions, and resolutions were passed and signed and attested to be published, and then a kind of a concrete structure was brought into the tradition of singing these Padigams. And of course, there has always been an impact of music, and the most recent past, film music as we call it, every decade being ruled by an individual, and their music had its own impact too. And most recently, with digital whatever taking over everything, and music of remixes for Tevara Padigams and all that is happening. Traditional people wouldn't, of course, want it, but yeah, as it is happening, but more patronage is undoubtedly needed. The Adivins are doing quite a bit. People who can are doing quite a bit. As individuals, if there is a way to support one Odhuvar family, please come forward to do it, because they have been shouldering a faith, a cultural system which is a little more than 2000 years old. If anything to be addressed as Tamil Isai, as seen in the Sangam literature, as seen in epics like Chilapadikaram and Manimekali, that which had travelled along with our culture for the past 2000 years, the last vestiges are being shouldered by the Odhuvars. Everything else is mobbed, everything else is camouflaged, everything else is changed, but to call something as Tamil Isai, following the essence of it, still the fun part of it especially, it is with the Odhuvars. So you can in fact identify them like endangered species. They are depleting in numbers over decades. It is definitely on us, a minimum part at least, to try and see if something can be done. Strengthening the community, giving them their stages. In fact, during the festival that we conducted, one of their requests was, please give us a chance to perform a Tirumurai Kacheri in all your house functions. Weddings or Satyapurtis or Grihapravesams or Simandams, if you can request them to come and give a 2-hour Kacheri or a 1-hour Kacheri, they'll be more than happy to present it. And let me tell you, some of these Odhuvars are brilliant with their music, and they can just improvise the aura of the space multifold. So that was one of those aspects that they look forward to. And so whatever is possible from your side, please extend it if you actually know an Odhuvar. And of course, the government has got to do its own bit, like insurance and other incentives, and post-retirement plans are all there. So the corpus deposit by Dharmapuram for each of the student is a game changer in the recent past, in fact. And most recently, the Kalimamani recognition that has been given to several Odhuvars so far. And the recent recipient is our very own, very respectful Satgurunatha Odhuvar, the Odhuvar of Kapalishwara temple, who was awarded the Kalimamani last year. And for the first time in history, Padma Shri Award, the Padma recognition, the first Odhuvar ever, thankfully happened after several years of prayers this year, and it was given to the most senior and the most deserving member, Tirupani M. Swaminathan Ayya, who is most senior, in fact, today within the community, and a great scholar of arts. Given his age, he can recall incidences which involves Shiva temples and Odhuvar traditions and all that like a little kid. And he's ever active when you start talking about Pannisai and Tirumuraigal. He just spots a very kiddish smile, and immediately he strikes a conversation. So you needn't really worry that he's aged and might not be good to disturb him and all. In fact, he loves to interact with people. Wherever you see him, if you can strike a conversation, he can recall immediately from his memory and quote from several incidences and occasions, and sing like several other people and show the difference in the way they have handled fun and whatnot. So at least if something can be done to document the oral knowledge that they have today and get it, immortalized, nothing like it. And at my level, yes, we've been trying to bring in this UNESCO World Heritage, intangible heritage status to Odhuvar tradition. That is a status that UNESCO declares, and when that is in place, you cannot change it, you cannot change the tradition, you cannot play with it, you cannot improvise it with your own imitation and all that. It will be recognized for what it is as a value. In fact, if an organization like INTA can take it up and support in taking it forward with the government and help facilitate a dialogue, nothing like that. If that can be done, yes, this is probably arguably the oldest school of music still in existence, being used for the same purpose that it was convened, to render songs in front of God. That is still happening now. I think across India, this is the only school that is still following it. So I think they are certainly a cultural icon of all of India and all that is Bharatiya Sanskriti. So they need to have their due recognition, and at some point they should be celebrated. Concluding with the praise on the streets of Tiruvarur by Shekidar, where he says, the parrots learnt the Tirumurai and they were all day busy singing it. The Mainas learnt it from the parrots and they started forming a choir. Ullam aar urugadavar, Urvidai Vallalar, Tiruvarur Marangelam, Tellum Osai Tirupadihangal, Paingillai Paduva, Ketpana Puvaigal, whose heart will not melt. In all the streets of Tiruvarur, where is enshrined the Lord who rides the bull, The divine padigams are rendered by the green parakeets. The starlings listen to them in rapture. With that, I'd like to conclude the session. Thank you. மூர்த்தி எல்லாம் வாழி எங்கள் மூலகுரு வாழி அவர் வார்த்தை எங்கும் வாழி அந்த வாழி வராமல் எல்லாம் ஸ்ரீ தியாகராஜ பிரபை ஸ்ரீ தியாகராஜ மகாராஜ விஜயத்தை ஆரூரா தியாகேஷ். நன்றி, வணக்கம்.
I just also want to announce that similar to UNESCO being a world recognition, because there's a long waiting list for various aspects of our heritage that has not yet got recognition. In INTAC, tomorrow we are launching what is called Anant, and that is going to be a list of heritage to be recognized in India. And maybe we'll take Tirumurai as the first item, and tomorrow is the Popul Jayakar lecture, the 16th Popul Jayakar lecture, which will be streamed online. It's being held in Delhi, but being streamed online, and the announcement for Anant will happen tomorrow. I'm just sort of announcing it one day ahead because we happen to be here. And it's also a celebration of World Heritage Day on 18th, that's day after tomorrow. So we're very happy that you brought to us such an important part of our heritage, and we hope the Odhuvars will get the recognition they deserve and take it forward to the next generation and further. Thank you so much. A small token from us. Happens to be a sketch of the Madurai temple.
Good evening. On behalf of INTAC, I extend a very good thanks, and it was really overwhelming, Madhusudan, for all the information you shared with us. And it was like an extension of the festivities of the just recently concluded festival in the Kapalishwar Koval. We got to know so much, and there's a lot to learn from here. The kind of passionate delivery you did of all the information really speaks about how well you've researched, and you really want to share it with everybody. Thank you very much for that. I thank all the participants for attending this lecture today. Please do encourage INTAC and attend all the talks. Madhusudan has been a crowd puller always, and he's done it again today. I thank Ashwita for sharing the space as graciously as ever. They've always been supportive. I thank them again for sharing the space with us today. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
There's also, many of you do not receive our invitations. Some of you do, I hope. And if you would please put your names and your email IDs and phone numbers down there, that will help. If you're INTAC members, we'll add you to our WhatsApp group. If you wish to receive our invitations, please put your email ID down. Thank you. And Ashwita wanted to take you on a walk through the paintings. Those of you who would like to do that, please join the team.